My aunt murdered my parents for their money and had me forcibly medicated to keep me silent, so I secretly gathered enough evidence to get her arrested. Now she's out of prison and has the nerve to demand her rightful share of my trust fund. My uncle consistently advised me to remain humble, regardless of success, a lesson my parents truly embraced. My father launched a modest technology venture from our garage, which unexpectedly flourished, enriching our entire family almost instantaneously. Yet, observing us, one would never discern our newfound affluence. My parents feared I might develop into one of those individuals who equate money with identity, so they maintained a simple lifestyle. My attire was sourced exclusively from secondhand stores or discount outlets, and I was never permitted to own the latest mobile phone or tablet. We even possessed an aged, noisy vehicle. Our cat, Whiskers, consumed the most economical brand of pet food available at the supermarket. For a considerable period, I resented this situation profoundly. I would surreptitiously view online holiday gift compilations where girls showcased heaps of expensive presents, and I desperately longed for that experience myself. At school, I observed other girls adorned in designer apparel and carrying luxurious handbags, and the envy felt like a physical blow. However, everything shifted when I reached my 16th birthday. I was seated at the rear of my mathematics class when my friend Sarah entered, wearing a charming, yet clearly pre-owned, jacket. Madison, a genuinely affluent girl positioned at the front, turned to her companion and remarked, audibly enough for everyone to hear, "If my family couldn't afford new attire for me, I would honestly cease to exist." They both erupted in laughter, as if it were the most amusing jest of the moment. In that instant, I finally comprehended what my parents had strived to shield me from, and a wave of gratitude washed over me. I suppose they noticed my cessation of financial complaints, as they began to relax their strictures somewhat. It wasn't anything extravagant, but they surprised me with an additional holiday that year. That's when we planned a visit to my mother's sister, Claire. Claire was the antithesis of my parents. She perpetually exuded the scent of an expensive fragrance, wore genuine diamond jewelry that shimmered with her every movement, and drove a vibrant red sports car that seemed plucked from a film scene. We hadn't seen much of her, and she insisted we all embark on her boat for the day. I recall feeling utterly peculiar and out of place standing on the pier. Her vessel was enormous, resembling a small yacht with gleaming white decks and leather seating. Claire emerged to greet us, clad in a designer swimsuit and costly sandals that likely surpassed the value of our car. Meanwhile, my family and I stood there in our worn, faded swimsuits from a budget retailer. Around 4 in the afternoon, the weather abruptly deteriorated. Ominous clouds gathered, and the captain began steering the boat back towards the shore. The waves grew significantly large and turbulent, and I became severely seasick. Consequently, I descended to one of the cabins below deck to recline. Upon finally reaching the dock, I rushed to locate my parents, eager to share a laugh with them about the chaotic storm, but they were nowhere in sight. Claire stood there, feigning sorrow, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief, though no tears fell. "They're gone," she announced, her voice loud and theatrical. It felt as though all the air had been expelled from my lungs. The waves became so severe they were swept overboard, and no one realized until it was too late. I simply collapsed there on the dock. Claire signaled someone to assist me into her car, and her driver transported me to her vast, desolate residence. I attempted to speak, but no words would emerge. For the subsequent few days, I remained confined to bed, feeling numb. Back then, I was merely a child, and I believed she was exerting every effort to find my parents. After 3 days, she informed me they had been found. She claimed their bodies were so disfigured I could barely identify them, but it was sufficient for a funeral. I wished to wear a simple blue dress my mother had purchased for my birthday, as it still retained her scent. However, upon accessing my wardrobe, all my old clothes had vanished. "You are a prosperous young woman now, and you must dress accordingly," Claire stated in a cold, unkind tone. She presented me with a heavy, shimmering black dress that felt entirely wrong. The sole remnant of my parents I possessed was our cat, Whiskers. Each night, when I began to weep, he would leap onto my bed and commence purring, rubbing his head against my cheek. It felt as though he was the only one who understood. He was the only one around whom I felt secure. This was because whenever Claire observed me appearing even slightly distressed, she would offer me a gift. Each present was more expensive than the last: a costly handbag, the newest phone, luxurious headphones. She expended so much money attempting to purchase my happiness that I began to feel guilty for ever displaying my sorrow in her presence. That is how Whiskers became my entire world. Every evening, I would sit in my new, opulent white bed, feeling utterly hollow inside, and Whiskers would curl up on my lap, rubbing his face against mine until I almost smiled. The way his green eyes gazed at me, imploring me to play, was the only thing that could rouse me from bed on weekends. However, I am a very light sleeper. So, every single night, just before drifting off, I would gently place him outside my room and close the door. It was around noon on a Sunday when I went searching for him. I had spent the entire morning simply scrolling on my phone and weeping, but he was nowhere to be found. Then Claire entered the living room, carrying a pet carrier. My heart sank when I saw what was inside. It wasn't Whiskers. It was a tiny white dog with a pink ribbon. "I got rid of that unsightly cat that was always bothering you," she declared with a smile. "This is Princess." I honestly believed she was playing some sort of cruel joke, but then she opened the carrier and attempted to compel me to pet the dog. I fled back to my room without uttering a word. I simply stared at all the expensive, useless items in my room, striving to conceive of a single reason not to simply end everything. That's when I overheard Claire speaking on the phone downstairs. She was speaking louder than usual, and my curiosity was piqued. I opened my door just to crack to eavesdrop. "Of course, I had to eliminate them," she asserted, her voice brimming with confidence. The way they were raising her was practically child abuse. No child should be forced to live as if they are impoverished. My entire body grew cold. It was all deliberate. I crept down the stairs, my heart throbbing so intensely I thought it might rupture through my chest. Claire's voice resonated clearly through the house as she continued her phone conversation. I pressed myself against the wall, attempting to regulate my breathing. "The sedatives in their wine worked flawlessly," Claire stated, and I had to cover my mouth to suppress a gasp. "Marcus said they never even realized what was occurring before they went overboard." My legs turned to jelly. I slid down the wall, still listening as Claire chuckled at something the person on the other end said. The floor felt cold against my bare feet, and I realized my phone was dead in my pocket. I had forgotten to charge it again. "Sweetheart, is that you?" Claire's voice suddenly called out, much closer now. I scrambled up and hurried to the bathroom, flushing the toilet and running the water to create the impression I had been there the entire time. When I opened the door, Claire stood in the hallway, her phone conspicuously absent. "Dinner is ready," she announced, scrutinizing my face. Her eyes darted to the bathroom door, verifying if it had been fully closed. I followed her to the dining room where she had arranged an elaborate meal. My stomach churned as she placed a plate before me. She sat opposite me and began carving her steak. "I have some news," Claire stated, without looking up from her food. "I've already submitted the petition for temporary guardianship with the family court. The emergency hearing is in 3 days. It's merely standard procedure for orphan minors." She reached into her designer purse and retrieved official court documents. The summons was dated the day after my parents' demise. She had been planning this from the outset. I pushed my food around my plate, unable to consume it. "I need to contact my parents' lawyer." "Of course, sweetheart, though I should mention he is on vacation for the next 2 weeks. I've already confirmed." Claire's smile did not reach her eyes. I excused myself and rushed next door to the Johnsons' residence. Mrs. Johnson answered the door in her bathrobe, appearing surprised to see me. "Please, I require assistance," I began. But Claire materialized behind me before I could elaborate. "I am so sorry to trouble you," Claire apologized, tears streaming down her face. She is in shock and uttering dreadful things about everyone. The grief counselor warned me this might occur. Mrs. Johnson's expression shifted from concern to pity. She awkwardly patted my shoulder while Claire gently guided me back home. Once in my room, I locked the door and opened my laptop. My finger trembled as I composed an email to my parents' lawyer, but an automated reply immediately appeared, confirming his 2-week absence from the office. I attempted to call his emergency number, but it went directly to voicemail. A gentle knock sounded at my door. "Sweetheart, I am leaving your mother's sleeping pills outside your door in case you need help resting. The doctor advised you should take 2 if you are experiencing difficulty." I waited until her footsteps receded before opening the door. A prescription bottle rested on the floor. The label bore my mother's name, but something felt amiss. I grabbed my laptop and searched for the medication name online. My blood ran cold. These were not sleeping pills at all. They were antipsychotics that induced memory issues and confusion. The prescription date was 2 months prior to my parents' deaths. At 2 a.m., I cautiously opened my window and climbed out. The Johnsons possessed a landline I could use to call for help. But as I crept across their lawn, I noticed Claire's red sports car parked in their driveway. She was still there, likely fabricating more falsehoods about my mental state. I climbed back through my window and barely slept. The next morning, Claire served me breakfast with her customary feigned smile. "I've scheduled some brief counseling appointments for you," she stated, pouring orange juice. "It's a requirement for the guardianship proceedings. Dr. Brennan comes highly recommended." The doorbell chimed, interrupting her. I leaped up, hoping it might be assistance, but Claire reached it first. Through the window, I observed Officer Davis standing on the porch. My heart soared. My online police tip must have been effective. I'm here following up on a concerning report, Officer Davis announced. Claire's face transformed into a mask of apprehension. Oh, thank goodness you're here. I've been so worried about my niece. She produced a thick folder filled with documents, death certificates, guardianship papers, medical records. She's been saying terrible things since her parents' accident. The trauma has been overwhelming. While Claire diverted the officer with her performance, I slipped into her home office. My mom's daily planner lay on the desk. I flipped through it frantically and discovered an entry from the week before they died. PI investigating sees finances meeting Tuesday. They died on Monday. There you are. Claire's voice startled me. Officer Davis was gone. Time for your counseling appointment. Dr. Brennan specializes in trauma-induced paranoia. At Dr. Brennan's office, I noticed him taking notes before I even sat down. Over his shoulder, I could read, exhibits paranoid ideation regarding guardian, already inscribed on his pad. I remained completely silent for the entire session, but that did not prevent him from filling pages with observations. Selective mutism and oppositional behavior jumped out at me from his notes. When we departed, Claire tucked her receipt into her purse. She had paid for 10 sessions in advance. Our next destination was the grocery store. While Claire examined organic vegetables, I scrawled help. She called my parents on a piece of paper and attempted to discreetly pass it to the cashier. Claire's hand shot out and seized it. I am so sorry, she told the bewildered cashier. Grief makes children do strange things. She crumpled the note and steered me out of the store. That evening, my phone vibrated with a text from Emma, inquiring if she could visit. Before I could respond, Claire snatched the phone from my hands. Let me handle this, she declared, typing rapidly. You need to focus on healing, not social visits. The guardianship hearing arrived sooner than I anticipated. I sat in the courtroom, observing Claire present herself as the epitome of a concerned aunt. When the judge finally asked me to speak, I recounted the phone call I had overheard. She was discussing sedatives and wine, I stated desperately. She admitted to killing them. The judge's expression remained impassive. Do you possess any evidence of this conversation? I shook my head, feeling tears sting my eyes. Your Honor, Claire's lawyer interjected. The child is clearly suffering from trauma-induced delusions. My client has already arranged for therapeutic support. The judge reviewed the stack of documents, Dr. Brennan's notes, a police report, statements from concerned neighbors. After what felt like hours, he granted Claire temporary custody for 90 days. He cited Claire's excellent reputation from her charitable work as a contributing factor in his decision. The following day, my teacher, Miss Martinez, telephoned the house, inquiring about my absences. Claire took the call in front of me. Yes, I understand your concern, Claire stated smoothly. That is why I am enrolling her in therapeutic homeschooling. She requires specialized attention right now. When Claire went to shower, I seized the house phone and dialed the number from my mom's planner. The private investigator answered on the third ring. Your mother was correct about the life insurance policies, he said after I explained my identity. I possess evidence, but I require $5,000 to release it. Your aunt employs some influential lawyers. Claire's voice echoed from upstairs. The shower had ceased. I hung up quickly. Over the next few days, Claire displayed printed copies of every email I sent, every text I received. It's for your safety during this vulnerable time, she explained. The printer history indicated she had been monitoring my communications since before my parents' deaths. A woman arrived the next morning, introduced as my educational consultant, but I recognized the medical scrubs beneath her jacket. She was a home health aide, there to report on my every action. Jake attempted to visit that afternoon, but Claire intercepted him at the door. I overheard her threatening to report his underage drinking to college scouts if he contacted me again. He departed without argument. Late that night, I stealthily entered Claire's office and utilized her own laptop to email the private investigator, consenting to wire money from my savings. Her browser history was still open. She had been searching out rentals for 3 months prior to my parents' deaths. The next morning, the bank called about unusual activity on my account. Claire had already frozen it as a protective measure. In frustration, I grabbed her laptop and hurled it against the wall. The screen shattered into 1,000 fragments. Claire entered just as the laptop struck the ground. Instead of anger, she smiled. I will need to document this violent behavior for the permanent guardianship filing. The following evening, a man arrived at the house carrying a medical bag. Claire introduced him as Marcus, her grief support partner, who would be moving in to help monitor my safety. He possessed broad shoulders and cold eyes that tracked my every movement. While Claire showed him around, I noticed the small, locked bag he kept close to his side. Marcus settled into the guest room down the hall from mine. That first night, I heard him pacing the hallways at regular intervals, his footsteps pausing outside my door every hour. The pattern persisted throughout the night, rendering genuine sleep impossible. I awoke the next morning feeling groggy and disoriented. 12 hours had somehow elapsed, though I only recalled fragments. Claire sat at my bedside, explaining that I had experienced a severe breakdown requiring sedation for my own safety. The security footage she showed me was unsettling. I appeared to be conversing with invisible individuals, pulling at my hair, attempting to climb out windows, but I had no recollection of any of it. Over the subsequent days, workers installed security cameras throughout the house. Claire explained they were for my protection, casually mentioning she could remotely monitor the feeds from her phone. The cameras covered every angle, hallways, living spaces, even outside my bedroom and bathroom doors. Privacy became a distant memory. Mrs. Johnson visited with her renowned coffee cake, expressing concern about my well-being. Claire thanked her warmly, then produced her tablet to display edited security footage. The video showed me pacing my room, engaging in animated conversations with empty air. Mrs. Johnson's hand trembled as she set down her coffee cup. She departed quickly, avoiding eye contact with me. While organizing my mother's jewelry box, searching for anything that might prove helpful, my fingers located a hidden compartment. Inside was a small recording device. My hand shook as I discovered audio files dated weeks before the yacht excursion. The recordings captured Claire discussing the trust issue with Marcus, but static corrupted half the files, rendering them legally useless. Desperation compelled me to steal Claire's car keys while she napped. I knew this action would be used against me in court, but I had to reach the police station. My fingers touched the same keys my mother had held just weeks ago. Their weight felt significant. The detective at the station listened attentively to my narrative. He reviewed the partial recordings with genuine interest, but explained they were insufficient without corroborating evidence. He suggested finding a lawyer immediately, though we both understood Claire had already compromised that avenue. Returning home, I found Emma's parents waiting in the living room. They had come for what Claire termed an intervention regarding my delusions. Claire had been contacting everyone, disseminating her narrative of my mental deterioration. I attempted to explain the truth about Claire's confession, but my desperate shouting only reinforced their perception of my instability. Claire calmly documented my outburst on her phone, while Emma's parents exchanged pitying glances. Only Emma, reluctantly dragged along, caught my eye. She mouthed, "I believe you." While her parents pulled her toward the door, Claire filed for expedited permanent guardianship, citing my escalating mental health crisis. The hearing was scheduled in just 30 days. Dr. Brennan increased our sessions to daily, meticulously documenting what he termed my fixation on conspiracy theories. During one session, he showed me a brochure for a residential treatment center. My name was already filled in on the admission forms. My childhood friend, Sophia, had become a paralegal since we had last spoken. She visited secretly while Claire attended a charity gala, bringing guardianship law books with highlighted passages about challenging proceedings. We huddled in my room, whispering about legal strategies and evidence requirements. Her presence felt like a lifeline in an ocean of isolation. Claire returned early, discovering Sophia in my room. Her face remained calm, but her voice carried steel as she threatened to report Sophia to the Bar Association for practicing without a license. Sophia gathered her books quickly, shooting me an apologetic look before Claire escorted her out. That night, I photographed pages from Claire's day planner showing a meeting with Marcus at the marina the morning my parents died. The evidence felt solid. Finally, something concrete. But I had underestimated Claire's thoroughness. The private investigator contacted me through Sophia with shocking news. He discovered Claire had taken out life insurance policies on my parents 2 years prior. The policy specifically mandated accidental death for full payout. This was the definitive proof I needed. Claire appeared in my doorway the next morning, holding printed emails between my mother and the investigator. She knew everything. The emails discussed Claire's mental instability and my parents' plans to financially disinherit her. Every piece of evidence I had gathered, she countered with something stronger. She had been planning this for years, not merely months. She showed me my own baby book where she had made notes about inheritance plans from the time of my birth. Jake's father initially agreed to help after Jake pleaded with him to intervene. As a lawyer, he could have made a difference. But Claire visited his office with a folder labeled with his name, casually mentioning his tax evasion. He withdrew his offer immediately. The family lawyer finally returned from vacation, but Claire had that covered, too. She produced power of attorney documents bearing my parents' signatures. I knew they were forged, but proving it would require time I did not possess. Breaking into Claire's filing cabinet necessitated waiting until both she and Marcus had left the house. I photographed everything: forged signatures compared to genuine ones, financial documents, correspondence. Finally, I possessed concrete evidence of her deception. The relief felt overwhelming. At the public library, I uploaded everything to cloud storage, creating multiple backups across different accounts. The security camera captured me repeatedly looking over my shoulder, paranoid about being discovered. My paranoia proved justified when Claire arrived with Marcus, having tracked me through my phone's location. They escorted me out while the librarian watched helplessly, unable to intervene. Marcus replaced the home health aide, becoming my full-time monitor. During meal preparation, he mentioned his background managing difficult patients in psychiatric facilities. The threat was unmistakable. With every meal he prepared, I wondered what might be mixed in. Emma climbed through my window one night, tears streaming down her face. Her parents were divorcing, she explained, largely due to disagreements about my situation. Her father believed me, but her mother sided with Claire. We devised a plan for Emma to convey evidence to her father, but Marcus discovered us. He quickly sedated me while Emma hid in the closet, barely escaping when he left to retrieve Claire. The next morning, Claire filed a police report about the break-in, obtaining a restraining order against Emma. Another ally lost. Another barrier constructed around me. The permanent guardianship hearing loomed with no legal representation. The court-appointed lawyer had not even attempted to meet me. A hunger strike seemed like my only recourse. After 3 days without consuming Claire's food, Marcus restrained me while force-feeding me. Claire documented what she termed my eating disorder, adding another symptom to my supposed mental illness. During the struggle, Claire finally divulged her motivation. Her gambling debts would ruin her without my parents' money. They had offered rehabilitation, but refused financial assistance. She had mentally spent their millions long before taking their lives. The antipsychotics Claire had been administering made planning difficult, but I calculated the precise dosage required for hospitalization without permanent damage. The overdose brought paramedics and temporary liberation from the house. In the hospital, I informed nurses about the forced medication, but Claire arrived with documentation portraying me as attention-seeking and self-harming. She used the incident to request emergency guardianship, claiming I was a danger to myself. The legal system moved more swiftly when safety was involved. Sophia visited disguised as a candy striper, bringing news that the private investigator would testify if someone paid his fee. He had been receiving threatening calls about his license. Madison, the same girl who had ridiculed Sarah's secondhand clothes, became my improbable hope. I approached her with my story, pleading for assistance. She agreed to pay the investigator, but only if I publicly confessed my parents were poverty-obsessed eccentrics who caused their own deaths. The betrayal of their memories stung, but I agreed. I had to choose between their values and their justice. The judge moved the hearing up due to the medical emergency. 72 hours to build a case from a hospital bed felt impossible. Claire's lawyer played golf with the judge. Another connection in her web of influence. The realization of Claire's true objective struck me during a medication-induced haze. She intended to keep me alive but incapacitated until age 25, when the trust fully matured. Then she could inherit as my guardian. The medications were not merely controlling me. They were slowly poisoning my mind. Cognitive decline over time would render me unable to challenge her. I convinced a skeptical toxicologist to test my hair samples by showing him photographs of my deceased parents, manipulating his empathy concerning his own daughter. The test would prove long-term drugging. Feigning that the medications were effective, I acted compliant around Marcus. He relaxed enough to admit details about the drugging, while I secretly recorded on a phone Emma had concealed during her visit. The evidence was accumulating, but so were the obstacles. A hospital social worker finally took notice after observing bruises from the force-feeding. She initiated an independent investigation, offering hope, but Claire arrived with discharge papers and legal documents granting her medical decision-making power. The papers were dated before my parents' death. More evidence of premeditation, but also further proof of her meticulousness. During transport home, I seized the steering wheel, causing a minor accident. Marcus struck his head on the window, requiring hospital treatment. I fled the scene, arriving at the police station, bloodied and desperate. My appearance perfectly aligned with the mentally ill narrative Claire had constructed. The detective from before took me seriously. But Claire's lawyers arrived with involuntary commitment papers signed by 2 doctors. One was Marcus's medical school roommate. Another connection in Claire's network. Emma's father, now separated from his wife, offered limited legal assistance. His resources were strained from divorce proceedings that Claire had helped instigate by feeding his wife doubts about me. The private investigator finally came forward, but revealed he had been playing both sides. Claire had hired him first to investigate my parents. His evidence could benefit either party, depending on who offered more. Trust became impossible when everyone had a price. While Marcus was sedated in the hospital, I used his phone to access Claire's cloud storage. The password was my parents' anniversary date, a cruel irony. Inside were yacht rental agreements and a manifesto about how wealthy individuals who do not share with family deserve consequences. The files revealed something worse. Claire had tested the sedatives on my grandmother first. Her heart attack 2 years ago was not natural at all. I remembered complaining about grandmother's will at dinner once, how she left everything to charity. My own words had given Claire the idea to begin with her. I scrutinized the original will more carefully. If both my parents and I died, everything would go to charity. Claire needed me alive, but incapacitated, to inherit as my guardian. The pieces clicked together with stark clarity. To safeguard the evidence until the hearing, I wrapped the USB drive in plastic and swallowed it. The hospital x-ray would detect it, but I hoped the court would demand it first. My stomach churned at the thought, but I had no other alternatives. I called Sophia from a hospital payphone, asking her to file an emergency injunction regarding medical abuse. It would trigger a mandatory psychological evaluation that could yield unpredictable results. Sophia agreed, despite knowing it might cost her paralegal certification for overstepping boundaries. The next morning, Claire's traps sprang perfectly. She arrived with printouts of my browsing history, showing searches about feigning mental illness and inheritance law. The timestamp indicated I had made these searches while supposedly sedated. She had been using my devices while I was unconscious. Every ally who had assisted me faced immediate retaliation. Emma's family was under investigation for tax irregularities. Sophia lost her employment after an anonymous complaint. The private investigator's license was suspended pending review. Claire had prepared leverage against everyone for years. The hospital social worker who had begun assisting me was suddenly transferred to another facility after an administrative complaint. My last medical advocate vanished overnight. Tomorrow was the guardianship hearing, and I possessed evidence, but no credibility, allies, but no power, truth, but no voice. The morning of the hearing, I dressed in the attire Claire had selected, conservative and childlike, designed to make me appear vulnerable and unstable. We arrived at the family courthouse where my parents had been married 20 years ago. Their wedding photographs still adorned the wall near the clerk's office. The courtroom filled with individuals testifying against me. Former friends described my concerning behavior, while Claire maintained perfect composure. She had destroyed lives to reach this moment, but her facade never faltered. Claire's lawyer presented evidence of my deteriorating mental state. The suicidal attempt that was actually my calculated overdose. The violence of smashing her laptop. The theft of her car. Each action I had taken to save myself became proof of my instability. When my turn came to present evidence, Claire's lawyer mentioned they had video of my suicidal attempt ready to play if I continued fighting. The threat was clear: accept defeat or be further humiliated. Suddenly, the fire alarm blared through the courthouse. Everyone evacuated in controlled chaos. In the confusion, I pressed the USB drive into the court clerk's hand, whispering urgently about the evidence it contained. Through the glass doors, I saw Emma pulling the fire alarm, her father waiting to accept the blame. Court reconvened 20 minutes later. The clerk mentioned receiving evidence during the evacuation, but Claire's lawyer immediately objected to its admissibility. The judge agreed to review it privately during recess. When we returned, the judge's expression had changed. The USB contained yacht rental contracts, showing Claire had rented the same boat 6 times for practice runs before my parents' final trip. Receipts for sedatives matched every practice date. She had rehearsed their murders like a performance. Claire's lawyer argued that the evidence was obtained illegally, and my mental state rendered me an unreliable witness. He produced expert testimony about false memories and trauma victims. The case hung in a delicate balance. The judge offered a compromise. I would receive an independent guardian, but I would have to undergo 6 months of psychiatric treatment. If I refused, Claire would gain permanent guardianship immediately. The choice was mine: accept limited freedom with Claire exposed, or fight and risk losing everything. I recalled my father's favorite saying, "Sometimes you win by not losing everything." With trembling hands, I signed the agreement using the pen my mother had given me for my 16th birthday, the one thing Claire had not taken. Claire was charged with fraud, but not murder. Without bodies or direct evidence of the killings, prosecutors could not prove homicide. She received 5 years in minimum security prison, eligible for parole in 2. Her gambling debts would follow her upon release. The court appointed Catherine Chun as my guardian, a social worker specializing in cases like mine. She managed my finances until I turned 21, but she also protected me from Claire's lingering influence. My relationships with friends were permanently damaged. Emma's family blamed me for their divorce. Jake could not look at me without seeing the girl who had almost ruined his father. I moved into supervised housing near the courthouse, sharing a small apartment with 2 other wards of the state. 3 times a week, I attended mandatory therapy sessions where I genuinely began processing my grief. The therapist was Dr. Brennan's former colleague, but she seemed sincerely interested in helping. 6 months later, the private investigator sent me his final report through Catherine. My parents had known Claire was dangerous, but kept her close to monitor her. They had been building a case against her while pretending to trust her. Their love and paranoia had been intertwined, each fueling the other until it destroyed them. The report included one last revelation. Claire had been embezzling from my father's company for years, using her gambling losses as cover. My parents discovered it weeks before they died. They planned to confront her after the yacht trip, desiring one last family moment before severing ties with her forever. I visited their graves on a dreary Tuesday morning, precisely 2 years after their deaths. A service dog named Bailey walked beside me, trained to detect anxiety attacks before they began. The therapy program had paired us 6 months prior. Standing at their headstones, I finally comprehended the price of survival. Claire's greatest cruelty was not ending their lives. It was forcing me to become someone they would barely recognize. Someone who betrayed their memory to Madison, who sacrificed others to save herself, who learned to think like Claire to overcome her. The inheritance would be mine in 3 years, but it felt like tainted money now. Indeed, I had won by not losing everything, just as my father had taught me. But the cost of that victory would accompany me forever. Some nights I still heard Claire's voice in my head, reminding me that we were not so dissimilar after all. Bailey pressed against my leg, sensing my distress. I knelt to pet her, grounding myself in the present. Tomorrow I would have another therapy session, another supervised day, another step toward a future my parents would never witness. But today, I simply stood there with my dog, carrying both my inheritance and the burden of how I claimed it.